Nonconformists clash with police after Minnesota officer shoots black man. A man kicked the bucket after an official shot him during a traffic stop in Brooklyn Center, close to where Derek Chauvin is being investigated in the demise of George Floyd. Surges of smoke filled the air and boisterous bangs could be heard as the police in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, attempted to scatter swarms close to the police department on Sunday night. Credit Liam James Doyle for the New York Times. A 20-year-old black man kicked the bucket after a cop shot him during a traffic stop in a Minneapolis suburb on Sunday, sending many individuals into the roads where they conflicted with cops into Monday morning. The fights in Brooklyn Center came hours before the 11th day of the preliminary of Derek Chauvin, the previous Minneapolis cop who has been accused of killing George Floyd, started in a court under 10 miles away. Outside of the Brooklyn Center Police Department on Sunday night, smoke surged into the air as a line of cops shot elastic slugs and synthetic specialists at dissidents, some of whom heaved rocks, sacks of trash and water bottles at the police. City Hall leader Mike Elliott of Brooklyn Center arranged a time limit until 6 a.m., and the neighborhood school administrator said the locale would move to distant learning on Monday out of a plenitude of alert. Mr. Elliott distinguished the casualty right off the bat Monday as Don't Wright, 20. The shooting infused more disappointment and nervousness into the Twin Cities area, where Mr. Floyd's demise and the dangerous fights that followed are new on occupants' psyches as they anticipate a decision in the Chauvin preliminary. Boss Tim Gannon of the Brooklyn Center Police Department said an official had shot the man on Sunday evening subsequent to pulling his vehicle over for a petty criminal offense and finding that the driver had a warrant out for his capture. As the police attempted to confine the man, he ventured once more into his vehicle, so, all things considered, an official shot him, Chief Gannon said. The man's vehicle at that point went for a few squares and struck another vehicle, after which the police and clinical specialists articulated him dead. Boss Gannon didn't give any data on the official who terminated, nor did he say what the warrant was for or how serious the accident had been. However, the travelers in the other vehicle were not harmed. The boss said he accepted that officials' body cameras had been turned on during the shooting. Mr. Wright's mom, Katie Wright, told correspondents that her child had been driving a vehicle that his family had quite recently allowed him 14 days prior and that he had called her as he was being pulled over. He said they pulled him over on the grounds that he had deodorizers dangling from his rearview reflect, she said. Ms. Wright added that her child had been driving with his sweetheart when he was shot. The police said a lady in the vehicle had been harmed in the accident, however that her wounds were not dangerous. City Hall leader Elliott said his heart goes out to Mr. Wright's family and declared a news gathering for 11 a.m. focal. We will ensure that everything is done in our ability to guarantee that equity is done, he said in a video. John Harrington, the official of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, said the distress that followed Mr. Wright's demise had spread to a shopping center in Brooklyn Center and that individuals had broken into around 20 organizations there. By about 12 p.m., the vast majority of the dissidents had escaped from around the police division, when National Guard troops and Minnesota State Patrol officials showed up to back up the cops who remained around the structure with revolt stuff and rod. Boss Gannon said he had requested the Minnesota Bureau from Criminal Apprehension, the office that drove the investigation into Mr. Floyd's passing, to research the shooting. The shooting comes following 14 days of declaration in the preliminary of Mr. Chauvin, who is white, that has revealed the agony that the demise of Mr. Floyd, a black man, caused in Minneapolis. Members of the jury have heard from individuals who saw Mr. Floyd's capture, clinical specialists who depicted his passing, and police authorities including the Minneapolis police boss who denounced Mr. Chauvin's activities. Furthermore, the realistic video of Mr. Chauvin bowing on Mr. Floyd for over 9 minutes has been played more than once. Mr. Chauvin's legal advisor, Eric J. Nelson, referred to the shooting in Brooklyn Center in court on Monday morning and requested that the adjudicator sequester members of the jury to hold them back from seeing information on the fights. Mr. Nelson noticed that one member of the jury lives in Brooklyn Center and contended that hearers may stress over starting more distress in the event that they didn't convict. The adjudicator denied the solicitation. Shooting contentions are normal on Monday, after which the case will be in the jury's hands. Numerous organizations in Minneapolis have kept sheets over their windows since not long after Mr. Floyd's passing on May 25, when fights shook the city for quite a long time and scores of organizations were singed. Furthermore, black occupants in and around Minneapolis stay nervous over policing, said Winfred Russell, a city council part in Brooklyn Park, another suburb where a few organizations were broken into on Sunday after the shooting. You do have a ton of crude nerves here, he said. Ms. Wright, the casualty's mom, said that when her child had considered her during the traffic stop, she had encouraged him to give his telephone to a cop so she could give the protection data. At that point I heard the cop go to the window and say, "Put the telephone down and escape the vehicle," she said. She said her child had dropped the telephone or put it down, after which she heard fighting and an official telling Mr. Wright not to run. At that point, she said, somebody hung up the telephone. At the point when she got back to, her child's sweetheart replied and disclosed to her that he had been shot. "We need equity for Don't," she said. "We don't need it to be pretty much this brutality." Yet, hours after the fact, outside of the Brooklyn Center Police Department, dissidents recited and tossed things at cops, creeping nearer to the structure until they were pushed back when cops terminated shots that burst with a noisy bang and gas that consumed their throats and eyes. The gas arrived at a few apartment complexes across the road where families said they were shaken by the contention that emitted in their front yards. "We needed to close the entryways since it was all in my home," Tasha Nethercutt, a lady who lives in one of the condos, said of the gas terminated by the police. She said there were 4 kids in her condo during the distress, including a 2-year-old. Kimberly Lovett, who as of not long ago had been a property chief for the 4 apartment complexes close to the police headquarters, said she had headed to the space to keep an eye on her previous inhabitants and to show her disappointment with the police. "There are kids in these structures," she said, highlighting loft galleries, some of which had kids' toys dissipated on them. "What we're tired of is the police consistent murdering youthful black men."